Good evening. My name is Judy Ziz. I'm chair of the Legislative Committee of the League of Women Voters of Falmouth. On behalf of the Falmouth League, I welcome everyone here this evening. We thank FCTV for being our partner in making this broadcast possible. Check the FCTV website for rebroadcast times. The program also will be available on the FCTV website for streaming to computers and other devices. The League of Women Voters, as many of you know, is a nonpartisan political organization. We are nonpartisan because we never support a party or a candidate. We are political because we take stands on public policy issues, but only after study, discussion, and reaching a group consensus. The League of Women Voters encourages informed and active participation in government. It works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and it influences public policy through education and advocacy. To further these goals, we are presenting tonight's program, which we are calling A Conversation with Our State Legislators, and they are here via the Zoom. I'm going to introduce each of them so they can just say hello, and then they'll be back with you shortly. So first, I'd like to introduce State Senator Susan Moran.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here.
Welcome, and thank you for coming. And now Representative David Vieira.
Thanks, Judy. I'm glad we were able to reschedule this after losing power and internet throughout the town of Falmouth.
Yes, thank you. And everybody, thank you for cooperating with it. And now Representative Dylan Fernandes.
Thanks for hosting, Judy. Great to be with you.
Okay, I have a little bit to say, and then they will each have some chance to you'll see them again. We have questions for them, and we hope that you do as well. Please email your questions to the address shown on the screen. And the address is msc0512@comcast.net. That's msc0512@comcast.net. We will try to leave sufficient time for listener questions during the last segment of this program. Now, before we start asking our guests our own questions and those that you are providing, they will each have the chance to speak briefly, and we're talking about maybe 5 minutes or less about topics that they select. So first, I'm going to start with Representative Vieira.
Great, thanks, Judy. I think one of the things that we had talked about leading up to today was to kind of give folks an idea of what is happening with redistricting. New districts have been set for the House and the Senate. In the state constitution, a representative has to live in their district within a year before the election. So that requirement does not exist for the Senate within the state constitution. So we wrap this thing up a year in advance of the 2022 election. So my district, the 3rd Barnstable district, will change a little bit. My population didn't change much within my district. However, because of the islands in Representative Fernandez district, we had to make some adjustments because the districts have to be contiguous. So I will be picking up North Falmouth, Precinct 5 in the town of Falmouth, and I will be losing Buzzards Bay, Taylor's Point and Buzzards Bay over by the Mass Maritime Academy in the town of Bourne, in order for me to keep the numbers accurate. I will continue to represent all of East Falmouth precincts and continue to represent the entire town of Mashpee. If I get reelected, because I have to get through the next election. So that's the district that I'll be running for reelection in. So one of the other questions you had asked us to address was some of the things that we're working on currently. I'm a monitor in the 2nd Division. We are still using remote sessions in the House. And so every time the House is in a formal session, myself and 7 other representatives are in the chamber to be able to be the opposite side of remote for those individuals who aren't coming into the State House. I will say that over the last few weeks, more and more representatives have been coming to the chamber in person. We do have the vaccine mandate deadline was November 1st, and most, I think all but 5 now of the members of the House have attested to either being vaccinated or seeking an exemption. And so I'm hoping that as we go forward after the Thanksgiving and Christmas recess, that we'll see more members return to the House. And instead of being a monitor, I can go back to being a member of the Second Division and participating more fully than having to be plugged in. One of the things I know we're going to talk about tonight, and I know Senator Moran will talk about, is early education and care. There is a special commission on early education and care economic review. I'm a member of that commission, and it's one of the reasons why I have not signed on to the bill that the League supports. It's because as a member of the commission, I want to be able to hear all of the testimony of our hearings, our public hearings, our focus groups, before deciding what the final recommendations of our commission will be. And then very much so we'll either sign on to comprehensive legislation that the commission will submit or the Common Start legislation itself. Also, we just started having our meetings of the Special Commission on the State Seal, working with my good friend, Chairman Whedon of the Mashpee-Wampanoag Tribe, Jim Peters, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, and others from throughout Massachusetts. We are reviewing the state seal and motto in Massachusetts to decide whether or not it's appropriate to make any changes at this time. In the next couple of weeks, the Debt Advisory Committee will need to issue a debt advisory recommendation to Governor Baker for this upcoming fiscal year. I serve as the ranking member of the Joint Committee on Bonding, and as that ranking member, I'm an ex officio member of the Debt Advisory Committee, and so we're working on determining where the debt load should be, our recommendation to the governor for the upcoming fiscal year. Some of the local projects, many of you have seen it in the news recently. The Canal Bridges, we are continuing to focus the entire delegation, not only here in the Upper Cape, but Cape-wide, on the replacement of the Bourne and Sagamore Bridge. We had a briefing recently, met with some Army Corps of Engineer officials, Mass DOT, making sure that we're including organizations like the Bourne Recreation Authority, who owns the campground underneath of the bridge, and the other property owners, that they're part of the ongoing conversations of where rights of way will be for the new bridges. Just a few days ago, the commuter rail service report was issued by Mass DOT and Cape Cod Commission relative to bringing commuter rail to Buzzards Bay. This is a project I've been working on for 10 years now, actually. And with the new South Coast Rail project, we're showing a great feasibility to be able to offer year-round commuter rail service as a feeder through the new Middleborough station that's being developed for the South Coast Rail project. Last couple of things I want to mention is a permanent home for the Cape Cod Police Academy. We saw what happened in Boston today. 2 officers shot in the line of duty. They're in the hospital, but with non-life-threatening injuries. We need to continue to make sure after we pass police reform in the last session that we have the best training, equipment, and up-to-date training, refresher training for our local law enforcement officials. And with that, we have the commitment of the Massachusetts Police Training Committee to bring a full-time police training academy to our area. We are working with Joint Base Cape Cod and working with a few of the other municipalities to find that permanent home. Just in Falmouth alone, we're looking to put through a number of our officers this upcoming class. And if this class does not get up and running, it won't be until the year 2023 that the Falmouth Police Department will be fully staffed. So we need to fill these vacancies. We need to have an academy close to home that our police officers can attend. And then the Bourne Rail Trail. The Bourne Rail Trail is a project I'm working with one of my predecessors, actually, former Representative Tom Kerr, who is now the head of the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority. We're working with Mass DOT to look at connecting the Cape Cod Canal bike path with the Shining Sea Bikeway. And more to come on that as we explore the options between rail to trail or rail with trail. So those are a few of the things that I'm going to keep busy with over the winter when it gets cold, and look forward to our ongoing conversations this evening.
David, thank you very much. You've touched on several things that I think we're going to be touching on again later, but it was good to have a preview. So thank you. And now I'm going to move on to Dylan Fernandes.
Thanks, Judy. It's good to be with you. Always a pleasure to talk with the league and its members, and thank everyone for their participation in this tonight and in advancing voting in our democracy. It's one of the most important things I believe you can do. I'm glad we're doing this tonight. I woke up to having one side of my driveway having a tree down, and the other side of my driveway having an entire telephone pole down. So didn't get internet or power back for a while, so glad we were able to postpone. But look, I think, in thinking about kind of the future of our district and the future of our state, I mean, one thing's for certain, whether it's a blessing or a curse, we certainly live in really interesting times. As I've mentioned to league members before, I know this is on their mind, our capital was ransacked by Americans for the first time in history. We have biotech companies, some right here in Massachusetts, that have discovered how to design humans. Global warming's intensifying, and the pandemic continues to unfold, and there's new variants, and just how we respond to all these challenges, and there's just a few of them, will impact our lives for generations to come and future generations. And it's my belief that government should play a leading role in these and all the challenges moving forward. But it's really on all of us as a society to take collective action. And so one thing that we've done, in this coming out of COVID with this unprecedented challenge, has also presented some unparalleled opportunities. And so one thing that the House took up recently was Arpa funding, which is the around $5 billion that the federal government gave to Massachusetts to dig ourselves out of the impacts from COVID economically, physically, from a health perspective and the like. And to put this in perspective, this is the largest amount of funding the state has received since the Great Depression. This is an unprecedented amount of funding. And what we do with it really informs how their state transitions moving forward. And so we put $700 million to help essential workers and small businesses. Nearly $800 million went into physical and mental health, $600 million for housing, $350 million to address the climate crisis, along with $100 million for port infrastructure, which is going to be really important for our district. And the list goes on. We made really generational investments to a whole lot of things in Massachusetts. And this is just the first tranche of funding. There's more to come on this. And as we just saw from Washington, we're going to be getting another, we'll see, but maybe $8 or $9 billion more dollars for infrastructure. Nothing like this has happened here in generations, at least one full generation, maybe even two. This is completely unprecedented. And we need to be thinking long-term about how we're going to be using this money. The legislature really pushed back against spending it immediately and wanted to bring everyone into the process, hold a whole bunch of hearings so that everyone could weigh in on how we make generational investments into the people of the Commonwealth. And so a couple of quick things, because I know I'm probably only have a minute or two left here. But since last time we chatted, we also passed the Roe Act here in Massachusetts, as women's rights are under attack and abortion rights are under attack nationwide. In Massachusetts, we wanted to codify a women's right to choose and expand access for women seeking abortion health care. We also passed the largest climate bill in our state's history, getting us to net zero by 2050 with really clear goals on each section of the economy on what they need to be hitting to achieve that, along with some really specific issues around home heating. And then we also, this is kind of the battle that keeps on raging past the millionaire's tax again to fund our education and infrastructure with a surcharge on people who make over $1 million to have those really critical investments backed up with revenue that is equitably and progressively funded. So really looking forward to the discussion. I'll stop there and turn it over to Sue Moran.
Thank you very much. And yes, Sue, you're on now, Senator Moran.
Thanks so much, Judy. I can't tell you how pleased I am to be here with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, Rep. Vieira and Rep. Fernandez, and to thank the League and FCTV for this forum. You know, it's you don't have to look far, but on our own television to see the divisiveness across the country. And you know, one thing that we all share in this delegation and the entire delegation, including Senator Sear and Rep. Peake and of course Rep. Whalen and everyone in the delegation, is that we really look at what's going to benefit the community. And we certainly do have our party differences, but we don't let it get in the way of our work. And you know, that's so evident as we look at the ARPA funding that the House just went through, and right now my staff has been working incredibly hard. I'll be headed to the State House early in the morning, and the expectation, the hope of the Senate is to work as long as it takes to get through the Senate side of the ARPA amendments and funding. And if it's not doable, then to return on Friday after the Veterans Day holiday. I think Rep. Fernandez did a terrific job of talking about the parameters being one-time spending. And, you know, it's so crucial that we get folks together in the municipalities about the best way to invest in our future and not look at just the status quo, to really think bigger and better. When we look at climate change issues, we look at electric cars, we want cleaner air going forward. We were able to experience that a little bit during the pandemic, having less traffic. You know, when you look at the committee that Rep. Vieira and I are both looking at, the status of our next generation moving forward in educating our young folks, you know, it's a time to really pause and look at what's working and look at the equity in the entire situation. The bill that I filed, Common Start, is a very optimistic bill, and it is an economic bill in terms of particularly getting women back to work, to really getting the state funding for an ability to be able to look at those Head Start kids, look at kids, you know, in very early years from age 0 at birth, and see what kinds of needs they may have that put them on a more successful and healthy path to the future. My colleague, Senator Sear, is with, along with the Senate President, has put forth a mental health bill that will be hopefully passing tomorrow, that's incredibly comprehensive. And we see the mental health challenges that have affected every area of our community, going from, you know, addictions treatment all through. You'll also probably see the NEROS bill that Rep. Xaros filed with respect to having police dogs, if it doesn't interfere with any human health or need, be taken care of. I spent the day at Gillette today giving out coats to folks who, it's a mass military event, and I saw Officer Simonos was there, and I spoke with the chief. It's a great event in terms of, what people really need, and remembering that we're going to have folks who are cold. We're going to have folks, the Falmouth Service Center is going to have many, many demands. We've got Thanksgiving coming up. And so what we're trying to do is look at the big picture, look at the economic needs. Rep Vieira has had a bill that I've supported for burying the internet. When we open up the roads for telephone, electric, other services, I've going to be filing and have filed and am working on a bill to bury utilities. Rep Fernandez mentioned the storm we just had. I was 4 days without power, and I'm not even in a situation that many people need, for example, medication or monitoring that might have electrical requirements that many seniors and other folks have a need for. So I know we're going to hit a lot of issues today. I think the biggest thing I want to say with my time right now is that it's so important that we work together. It's so important that we join hands across the aisle and look at these one-time spending opportunities and make our world cleaner, healthier, more sustainable moving forward. So again, thanks, Judy. And now we'll just, I guess, turn the program back, and appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, all three of us. To some extent, you've touched on some of the things we'll be talking about, and that might shorten some of the other pieces. But now it's our turn, and we're going to discuss pending legislation in 5 areas. One is the storage of dry casks in Plymouth. One is the Common Start bill that Senator Moran has already talked about, and also that Representative Vieira has talked about. Voting legislation, immigration legislation, and redistricting. And we had a little bit about redistricting also. So I'm going to start with dry cask storage of spent nuclear waste in Plymouth. We all know about the Pilgrim facility in Plymouth that generated electricity and is now closed. Spent nuclear waste is there and will stay there. There is no other place for it to go. The spent waste will be stored on site in dry cask. A dry cask, I understand, is 20 feet tall and 11 feet in diameter, and when filled could weigh up to 300,000 pounds. By the end of the year, it is expected there will be 62 of them in Plymouth. The inner canister has a half-inch thick stainless steel wall, and it's warranted for 25 years. That inner canister is covered with a steel shell, and that is clad in 24-inch thick concrete. The contents are expected to remain dangerous for an unbelievable 250,000 years. Helium is pumped into the inner canister to increase safety. If there's leakage of helium, and that goes undetected, the protection it provides regarding corrosion, heat buildup, or combustion is limited or is lost. We are dealing here with safety over an unbelievably long period of time in what at least now is a marine environment. Who knows what's going to become? But metal corrodes, welds fail, and concrete cracks. Currently, there's very limited monitoring planned. The bill that's before both houses requires continuous real-time monitoring of each cask to detect temperature and rates of helium and radioactive release. Now I'm going to turn to our legislators, and I'm going to start off with Senator Moran, because I believe you're vice chair of the Joint Committee on Public Health, and I think this bill is before your committee. So could we have your views?
Yes, thank you very much. Plymouth is part of the Plymouth Barnstable district that I serve. And before I was even elected senator, I went to the State House, and as a member of the Assembly of Delegates, Deputy Speaker, I spoke on the Holtec management of the Plymouth nuclear site. And this is a continuing monitoring concern. The federal government has made a decision that there's not going to be, at the moment, long-term storage out in the Yucca, the prior facility. And so there's alternatives that need to be reviewed. At this point in time, the federal government is loath to take that view, and we're focused on the local situation. The Senate Bill 1507, an act relative to monitoring dry casks of spent nuclear fuel, had a hearing on June 22nd. I've co-sponsored it. And it requires, as you said, that stored nuclear fuel dry casks are reported to the Department of Public Health Radiation Control Division with respect to the temperature and rate of helium and radiation release. When I went to the State House, I carried with me one of those metal coffee containers that one puts in a car for the trip. And really, the width of the casks is about the same. There are grave concerns, obviously, right at the site of Holtec in Plymouth, but we all know the winds carry to Cape Cod and possibly Iceland. There are many, studies of how far, if an accident happens, that there could be radiation. And so this is an ongoing concern. It's an uphill battle. I worked with Senator Sear, Senator DiMacedo, before I was the Plymouth Barnstable senator, to place more voting capacity in the monitoring commission with the individuals that are there, because they include Holtec members that often wouldn't vote. And it was just really the votes of the commission were not being counted. It was not having any weight at all. It's really a battle that we're going to have to continue. I'm going to pass it on in a minute. As soon as I just mentioned that Senate 2206 is an act relative to prompt decommissioning. It establishes power plant areas within a 10-mile radius, including regions where dry casks are stored, in Senate 2207, an act relative to responsible emergency planning with respect to decommissioning and a settlement agreement with the Attorney General. So this is something that's going to be an ongoing concern, Judy.
Okay, well, thank you very much. You've given us a little bit more background. I don't want to spend too much more time on this because we have other things, but let me just check with your two colleagues and find out what their views are. If you could just sort of quickly tell us, do you think these bills ought to pass?
I'll be very quick. I agree with everything Sue said. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. Was one of the first things I did when I got elected was to call for the closure of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant, and now we need to do the follow-up work to make sure this is stored safely. And as Sue mentioned, the federal government has totally abdicated what should be their duties in this and what they actually promised us they would do, and that's a complete failure. So as the federal government fails to act on this, we need to come up with new solutions. This is one that I'm fully behind.
David?
Yeah, I totally agree. We have a two-part failure with the Department of Energy on this one and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. One is to require this type of monitoring as part of any dry cask storage. We had a series of meetings in Plymouth at the town hall trying to get them to look at including requirements during the process, and it was outside of their existing regulations, and therefore they said, well, we can't require this, we can't require that. Well, shame on them. First, they don't complete Yucca Mountain. Then they don't have a safe monitoring program for all of us that have to deal with keeping this stuff in our own backyards. And so today, actually, I wasn't aware of what the bill number was. We co-sponsored the bill this afternoon. And so I'm fully supportive of it. But I think one of the things that we need to continue to do is to have this dialogue with our federal delegation about getting the federal government back on track to fulfilling its commitment. If you look at the transportation plans and the testing that's been done, whether it's moving these materials, the spent rods, by train or by truck, there have been years, decades and decades of design and engineering to protect the transport vehicles. And so when early on the dialogue was, well, it's not safe to put it on the road, or it's not safe to put it on the rail, you'd be surprised. It's much safer to move these than it is to deal with these deteriorating casks at what will be hundreds of sites at some point across the United States, and then trying to deal with monitoring and then responding if the monitoring shows us that we do have a problem. We haven't even looked at what the response mechanism will be if this monitoring program shows us there is an issue. So,
I think we need to sort of to switch to another subject pretty soon. But I think my impression is that all three of you probably would support this bill. Am I correct with that? Good. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, there are a lot of problems here with what the federal government was supposed to be doing and didn't. I'm going to move on now to Come and Start. We've gotten a bit of an introduction of that from Sue. She's the a co-sponsor of it. I'm going to tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll see if everybody could briefly talk to us about it. Come and Start's a bill pending before both houses of the state legislature. It would provide affordable, high-quality early education and childcare for children from birth to age 12 and to age 15 for special needs children. The Come and Start program would increase the scope of public investment gradually over 5 years. It would do so by combining funding to providers with financial assistance to families. At the end of the planned rollout, no parent would pay more than 7% of family income for childcare or early education. At the lower end of the income spectrum, expenses would be fully subsidized. We'd be dealing with a sliding scale with the lowest income families getting help first. The bill also recognizes a need for after-school care and care for off hours such as evenings, nights, and weekends. And turning to providers, it would provide bedrock funding to protect fixed overhead expenses that are not dependent upon enrollment. And this is very important. Teacher compensation would track that of public school teachers. And professional development grants would be available. That's a quick summary of a lengthy bill. I assume that Senator Moran could give us even more. I do want to say that we have a question to ask each of our legislators. What can you do to promote this legislation? I think we know what Senator Moran is doing, so maybe I will go on to the other members. Dylan?
Sure, and I'm very supportive of this legislation. Look, I think it's just, as someone who's in his early 30s, this is something that is impacting a lot of my friends. I do not have children yet, but it will, I'm sure, impact me at some point. But it's tragic to see how people are having to choose between childcare and staying in the workforce or not. That's just something that is not a choice that anyone has to make. And it's particularly impactful for low and middle income families. So look, I'm very supportive of this. I want to see it pass. What I am doing to support it, I'm being very vocal about it. I've express my support in a number of ways. One is through co-sponsoring the bill. My name's literally on the legislation. Another is to talk to my colleagues about my support for it, particularly members of leadership in the House and committee and members of the committee, the chairs and the membership and the like. And right now, I think that is some of the most important things you can do. I've also taken part in kind of Common Start advocacy days, at least one or two that I can recall. And so just working both the kind of volunteer grassroots effort push and also the inside the building advocacy through the committee and through my colleagues.
Now, David, I think you said that you're still, you're on this Early Education Funding Commission, so you're not taking a position. If you've gotten some information from that commission, which would indicate which way things should go, I'd appreciate it, but we're running out of time. So, you know, if there's something that you could tell us briefly, I'd appreciate it. Or otherwise,
Yeah, I think one way that folks can get involved is we're still taking public comment at the commission level as well. I know Common Start has weighed in. We did have a virtual public hearing, I believe it was last week, but the record is still open. We're now working regionally on focus groups and gathering additional information. But the key points that are in the Common Start legislation are the themes that we continue to hear through the commission about affordability of rates, about the turnover, 33% turnover in this industry, and that's because of the salaries. We're seeing a lot of early educators who want to become public school teachers. And so that some folks are like, well, then we ought to, do this through the public schools. Well, that is one option of a delivery system. I'm still very much committed to a mixed delivery system. And I believe the chairs of the committee believe in that as well, that as we look at how do we bring the rates up to those of public school teachers, but also allowing whether or not they are public school teachers, which we have in some communities. As our student populations decline, we have an opportunity to potentially transition grade level teachers that are no longer needed in communities where the student population is dwindling and bring them over to early education and continue to have classrooms that would be available for those individuals that don't have other options, either through the private market or through outside organizations, nonprofits like Boys and Girls Club and YMCA and others. So my work is continuing to advocate through the commission, to work with Chair Peisch and Chair Lewis to see if we're going to be looking at putting out our own piece of legislation that takes all this together, or if we're going to look at taking the legislation that's there and combining them together with our recommendations. But very much engaged in that process.
Okay, thank you. So if you want to, we're definitely running behind, but if you want to, I think you're also on that commission. If there's just a little bit you'd like.
I am on the commission, and I'll make it short, Judy. The Common Start brilliant folks are the same ones who really pushed forward getting living wages moved ahead in Massachusetts. It's a very common sense idea, and it's a housing bill in the sense that if folks aren't paying as much as a monthly rent or a mortgage for childcare, then they will be able to put more into housing. It's a bill that supports women. We know so many women have lost work, lost places in their careers because they are the ones that the burden of childcare has fallen most on. It's an economic development bill. As Rep. Vieira said, in terms of putting people back to work, you'll see some things coming out of Arpa that are going to support all of these ideas. And I'm just proud, along with Senator Lewis, who chairs the committee that David and I are both on, to be leading this effort on behalf of the grassroots folks who, who really are the power behind it and who have made the demands and showed the need. So thanks, Judy.
You're welcome. Okay, we are going to move on to voting, and I'm probably going to do more interrupting here to try to get as much as we possibly can into this program. Voting is the next topic. As you know, many changes were made to our voting system due to COVID. These changes included early mail-in voting and enhanced early in-person voting. The first question is whether the legislature will make these changes permanent, but there are other voting issues as well. The state Senate has passed a bill called the Votes Act, which would make most changes permanent with some tweaks. That bill now has to go to the House. Provisions made permanent include early mail-in voting with ballot applications, not ballots, sent automatically to most voters. Early in-person voting with some tweaks on timing. Limited early tabulation permitted, but no results would be known and the public could view that process. Second checkout desk not required, as we just did. Flexibility regarding the selection of poll workers, and this piece I think most people like, use of drop boxes would be continued. There's also some new provisions. These would include permitting same-day registration, but not change of party. That's something that the League of Women Voters has been pushing for a long time. There'd be an amendment in the automatic registration system, and that would especially involve the RMV. And there are special new provisions for voting from overseas, including voting by the military, for voting by disabled individuals, and also for voting by those incarcerated individuals who do have the right to vote. Now, the Votes Act is not the only voting related bill pending. We have the FARE Act, and that's F-A-R-E, as in bus fare. That would make public transportation free on primary and election days. And there's a bill I believe all three of our legislators support, which would permit candidates who have children to use campaign funds for childcare during campaigns. So we're going to go back to our legislators. The main question I think here is whether you support continuing all of the provisions that we have already had into effect. And obviously, if you also support the new ones. But again, I'm trying to keep it as short as we can. And David, could we start with you?
Sure. So some of the things that we learned during COVID, I think we should continue. I think mail-in voting as an option is okay. I'm not a big fan of mass mailing of the pre-registration forms to get the ballot. I mean, all you have to do is go online, go to a library, go to a town hall, write yourself a letter and send it to the clerk. There's multiple ways to request that ballot coming in, but these mass mailings that have to be processed at the time when we're also asking them to open up early voting and to do a series of other pre-election activities that we hadn't done in the past. I'm hearing from the clerks, most of them, that it's a lot, particularly for the smaller towns and the smaller clerks' offices, to be able to continue to keep up with the pace of the changes. Because remember, the clerks' offices don't just deal with the elections. They deal with everything else that you have to do with the clerk's office at town hall. People are still born, people still die, people still get married during election season. And so I'm fine with the no excuse absentee ballot process, right? Basically, that's what that is. It's a no excuse absentee ballot. You can ask for it to be mailed, or you go in early, vote early during those periods of time. I'm okay with that. I am against early same-day registration. The integrity of being able to go through the documentation and add someone to the voter list while processing a line of individuals coming in to vote on election day, I think is just not reasonable to ask the election workers, the poll workers, to do that. It's very easy to register to vote. we've made it as easy as possible, and we continue to make it easier. So you know the election is coming up, register to vote before the election, and then either mail in your ballot or come to the polls.
I think you've touched on the main one, so I'm going to go on. I apologize for interrupting, but the problem is we are trying to cover quite a bit. So let's see where Dylan is on these.
Hey, Judy. Yeah, I'm supportive of all three initiatives. I am very supportive of breaking down barriers to access democracy. And, I thought it was like during the pandemic, during a global pandemic, Massachusetts had the highest voter turnout in history. It just shows how effective a lot of these programs are. We, through the House and through the Senate, passed a commission to look into whether candidates running for office could use their campaign funds to pay for childcare. The commission took a hard look at it and was supportive. And so I'm also, supportive of all three, but I think, a part of making sure that our legislature looks like us, is representative of us, has equity, is making sure we're also breaking down barriers for people to be able to run. It's frankly unacceptable that the legislature isn't 50-50 men and women. It should be directly representational. And so anything we can do to increase women's ability to run, that's a positive. And also men can use this too, so it's supportive both ways, but obviously I think this would probably have a larger impact in breaking down barriers for women as well.
I'm going to move on to Sue, who already voted for the bill. So if you would like to give us one or two reasons why you voted for it, I'd appreciate it. And then we're going to move on to immigration.
Sure. So there was a lot of debate about some of the issues that David brought up. And for example, Senator Comerford filed an amendment that helps out smaller towns. Bottom line, I don't think there's any more important right than citizens being able to contribute to the way that they're governed and to choose their leadership. And, it certainly does come at a cost of folks who are working on that incredibly important endeavor. But that's the way that you can really grow good government. So I'm really proud of the bill that the Senate put forth and the assistance it provides to clerks, to the Secretary of State, to the improvements of technology so that will lessen the work burden. We certainly did seek out and listen to concerns of the local town clerks, and many of which were addressed and will be addressed in the future. So I'm very optimistic that the improvements that we've made and the benefits that have come will continue into the future.
All right, now we are going to go on to immigration, and I am looking at the clock and having trouble deciding whether we are running behind or whether we're not. So we'll just keep on going. Immigration. There are two immigration-related bills, along with a second version of one of them, that once again have been introduced into the state legislature. One bill, often called Driving Families Forward, pertains to driver's licenses. The other, commonly known as the Safe Communities Act, relates to the relationship between local and state law enforcement and ICE, which is the federal agency that enforces immigration laws. The Driving Families Forward bill would permit Massachusetts to issue a standard driver's license to a resident, regardless of immigration status. With undocumented drivers tested, licensed, and insured, we really should all be safer if we're pedestrians or if we're drivers or if we're passengers. This would not be a real ID compliant license. That is, it would not let you onto an airplane. 16 states plus Washington, D.C. issued standard licenses to undocumented drivers, including two of our neighbors, Vermont and Connecticut. Massachusetts, the league feels, should do the same, and COVID magnified the importance of the bill. The other bill, called the Safe Communities Act, would make clear that local and state law enforcement are separate from federal ICE law enforcement. For example, if enacted, undocumented individuals would not be afraid to talk to our local police to report a crime and be afraid that if they did that, they could end up being deported. A shorter version would simply bar the use of state or local funds for ICE enforcement. Currently, our Barnstable County is the only county in Massachusetts, at least I believe so, with an ICE contract. If an undocumented individual who has been arrested by state or local authorities is being released from custody by the sheriff's office under the ICE contract, the person may be held and turned over to ICE, even if the person has not been convicted of a state crime. Indeed, except for Massachusetts, there only are 3 states with these contracts: Arizona, Georgia, and Texas. While it is common to talk about criminal aliens, these terms are used very loosely. For example, a non-citizen who remains in this country when the period of an authorized stay has elapsed has not committed a criminal act under federal law. The Safe Communities Act would still permit state law enforcement officers to hold a person and turn the person over to ICE if that person had been found guilty of a state crime and is being released after serving a prison sentence. There we do know we have somebody who is a criminal. Now, I'd like to start off with the driver's license bill. And Dylan, could you start us off with that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm very supportive of it. Co-sponsor it. It's also an issue that is really important to our district. The islands in particular have a huge and growing immigrant population. Nantucket, for the first time, has majority minority school district, almost entirely from new immigrant families. And there was actually increase in COVID cases that were tied to undocumented immigrants having to share the same vehicle because they weren't able to get licenses to drive on their own. And so this has actually also become a public health issue during COVID. So, I actually look at this significantly less of an immigration issue and look at it as a public health, public safety issue. The fact is that people who are undocumented are already driving, and they're already very productive members of our communities right here in my own district and across the Cape and Islands. And so from a public safety perspective, it makes a whole lot of sense for us to make sure that they are granted a license so that they know the rules of the road and go through proper training, and that they also have insurance so that if there is an accident, the other person is fully covered as well. One argument against this that I've heard, which I find a bit silly, is that this will attract a lot more immigrants to come to Massachusetts, which makes no sense. I'd be fine with that. I totally welcome them, but it makes no sense because that means they would, be skipping over a dozen other states that are before Massachusetts that already grant this responsibility to undocumented immigrants. States that are both traditionally red and blue already have this. So I'm very supportive. It's a public safety issue, public health issue. And at this point, I think just common sense.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
I really appreciate the way that Dylan described the issue. I completely agree, and I'm going to leave it at that for your time concerns so we can get to redistricting.
David?
So I think if we're going to go through the process of documenting and requiring the appropriate testing and everything that we do through the RMV currently, then we need to be partnering with our federal partners and have a pathway first to documentation, to legal status, and then a pathway to citizenship. Now, not all immigrants want to become US citizens, and that's fine. But the pathway to legal documentation can start with the process of issuing the driver's license. And so just issuing the driver's license to those that are not on a pathway to legal documentation, I would be opposed to. However, if we can work this into a comprehensive partnership that gets folks the legal status, green card, or pathway to citizenship, and make it comprehensive, then at the beginning, they come to the RMV and we welcome them to a series of services that makes all of the other resources that we would have available for them and their families more accessible, but also legitimized through the documentation process.
Thank you. And now we're going to move over to the other issue, which is the Safe Communities Act. And that one you and I have talked about quite a bit already. I just want to know, now you're on the ranking minority member of the Committee on Public Safety, I believe. So this comes before your Public Safety and Homeland Security. So this comes before that committee. And I'd just like to know what your current views are on the Safe Communities Act.
Again, so when we look at, you mentioned Barnstable County, and unless there's a recent change, Bristol County and Plymouth County, and the Commonwealth itself have agreements with ICE. The actual Commonwealth agreement was put in place when Governor Patrick was the governor of the Commonwealth through the Department of Corrections. And that is looking at the background through the ICE database of individuals who are being detained for whatever reason they've been detained, right? You don't go to the Barnstable County Correctional Facility unless you're been arrested and you're being processed. So when you get there, there's that process of going through the database to see if there's any other outstanding warrant or other potential, whether it's a criminal warrant or, as you mentioned, Judy, if there's a civil detainer, which is a whole nother process, as you mentioned. So I have no problem with checking individuals in that database. The database exists for a reason, so that we know who is either violating a civil law or has violated a criminal law. And being able to share the information from one agency to the other at that point of contact, I don't have a problem with. As you know, as you probably know, most, including Falmouth, the frontline police officers don't have access and don't have ICE partnering agreements and aren't pulling somebody over and checking the ICE database or responding to a traffic accident or responding to a domestic at a home. And checking the ICE database. That's not happening at primary law enforcement. Where it is happening is at the state level and at some of our county levels when individuals are transported after being arrested at the scene of a crime. And so that existing program, I don't have a problem with. I would not be in support of expanding it and having, terminals in each police cruiser where we're checking everybody at every call to service. Because as you said, that is then going to make folks that are potential victims of crime or informants of observing a crime less comfortable with contacting law enforcement. And we don't want to do that.
Thank you very much. And now, Sue?
I'm supportive of safe communities. I do not think it is the community policing job or benefit to be enforcing federal rules. And I think it can be disruptive to the community and misuse of resources. So in a word.
And I think, let's see, Dylan.
Yeah, I'm supportive of I'm very supportive of the bill. I'm a co-sponsor of it. I've supported it since I first came in here. The Lund decision handled a good chunk of this issue, but we need to go further and not deputize state and local officials as immigration enforcers. It just sows distrust in the immigration community for law enforcement, scares people from coming forward to report serious crimes, and in the end makes us less safe. And actually we are, Judy is right, that Barnstable County is the only county in all of New England that has a 287G agreement. Plymouth County ended theirs, and then Bristol County, in almost an unprecedented move, had theirs stripped away basically because of human rights violations at the prison. Whole nother issue, so it's just Barnstable County in the Commonwealth. I think it's an embarrassment that Barnstable County is the only county in New England that does this.
All right. Now I guess we're running a little ahead of schedule, so I apologize for cutting people off before. But let's go on to redistricting. Our last topic is redistricting. The League of Women Voters lists a number of criteria to be considered in redistricting, and these include equal populations, compactness, and communities of interest. The communities of interest means a group of people having interests in common, such as ethnicity, language, cultural expression, watersheds, and the like. This year was unusual for many reasons. The release of the census numbers was delayed. The state legislature prioritized redistricting over the redrawing of precincts. And currently, I understand there are no final decisions yet on the districts for the Governor's Council and for the United States House of Representatives. And there is a movement to keep New Bedford and Fall River in the same state, in the same US legislative district, because they do have communities of interest, which is one of the subjects that the League thinks about. On the other hand, I understand that maps have been drawn for the Massachusetts House and for the Massachusetts Senate. The last I heard, the bills were on the governor's desk, but you might be able to correct me. It may be that they have been signed or something else has happened with them. So I would really just like each of you to very briefly give us your views on the recent redistricting procedure and how it impacts the district that you currently represent. I think I heard a little bit of that at the very, very beginning from David, but we'd be interested in your views. So let's start with Dylan.
Well, a little bittersweet on my end. So as David mentioned, the islands grew by a whole lot. They grew by 8,000 people, which is absurd, honestly. It's like, I think I had some of the biggest, if not the biggest, district growth in the entire Commonwealth. So, you know, I'm excited. So many people like to live in what I believe is the most beautiful place on earth. But sadly, it means that from a numbers perspective, I'm going to have to shrink a little bit. And while it's been the honor of a lifetime to represent North Falmouth, the way the map shakes out, sadly, I'm going to have to lose North Falmouth, which is precinct 5. And it's, you know, Falmouth's my hometown. I live here. I grew up here. And it's always really sad for me to lose a part of it. But I still will have precincts 1, 2, and 6. And through the rest of my time here this session, you better believe that I'm going to be paying all my attention still on North Falmouth. It's still going to be it's still a part of this district. Everyone from North Falmouth should continue to reach out. And then David Vieira and I will get together as the maps change, and a big caveat on if we get reelected, and chat about how that transition should take place. But look, Falmouth is divided between me and David in terms of legislative districts. Both of us work so closely together to represent the interests of the entire Falmouth community. And that will never be lost on me, no matter how the district gets reshaped.
All right, David.
So as I mentioned earlier,
Winner of precinct 5.
yeah, I'm gaining 5. I'm losing precinct 3 in Buzzards Bay, which is difficult. So if you live in North Falmouth, this late winter and spring, summer, you'll see me coming around, knocking on some doors, getting out there into the area. Luckily, as town moderator, I've been able to work with constituents and campaign townwide for the municipal election. But as rep, it's an opportunity for me to go out and make myself known a little bit more in the village that is not part of the current district. And if I could just give a shout out to Mass Maritime, it's bittersweet to lose the academy after 10 years. Over the last 10 years, working as a member of the Capital Asset Committee, we've been able to get new dormitory space built. We have a new pier from the Seaport Economic Council, state-of-the-art pier and training center for the individuals that are working on the wind turbines. We have a new $21 million science building that just came through in the capital plan for this year, the hydrokinetic power program that the Academy has, and the final one that Dylan Fernandes and I love so much is the Schooner Ernestina, the packet ship that brought most of our Cape Verdean community members here to the shores of Massachusetts. She will be coming out of dry dock this fall, and she will now be ported at the Massachusetts Maritime Academy as a training vessel with funds in the Maritime Academy budget to maintain and operate that vessel. Her legal port will still be listed as New Bedford, but she'll get the tender loving care that she hasn't over the last couple of decades by being a training vessel at the Mass Maritime. So those major 5 projects that we've been able to accomplish in the 10 years make it difficult for me to say bon voyage to the Academy, but I'll still be over there with Representative Exaros or his predecessor in that district to be part of the Academy.
Okay, I'm glad we heard about the ship. That's very, very nice.
Well, I'm going to start with the broader issue just for a second. You mentioned New Bedford and Fall River, and Senator Sear and I have signed on to the effort to recognize the continuity of interest that remains there and to really keep that together. We think that is very important to the Cape and Islands, and I think it's important to the Plymouth Barnstable district. As your senator, I can kind of smooth over the concerns of both Dylan and David, because I will continue to represent all of Falmouth and all of Bourne. And I'm excited to be adding Mashpee. In terms of continuity of interest, it certainly consolidates the base interest that I've been working on since I was, just started on the Board of Selectmen in Falmouth and later with the county. And I'm also adding what I understand is the smallest town in Massachusetts, Plimpton, which I've been in briefly and am now making some outreach in across the other side of the canal. But it's, I think the process, Senator Brownsberger was the Senate lead in the redistricting process, and it was incredibly detailed, logical. There's a ton of outreach, and also really included some second thoughts when some community leaders raised some equity issues where it could be improved. The Senate went back and kind of tweaked a few things that actually ended up, and that's how I added Plimpton. So looking forward to I think the improvements in government that will come from the redistricting and appreciate any input from the league in that going forward.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
I just want to thank Senator Moran and Senator Sear, who I had a chance to talk to earlier this week about the 9th Congressional District. Being an Azorian American myself, and southeastern Massachusetts having the largest concentration of Azorian American immigrants, to see those two cities brought back to one congressional district, I think is important. Senator Brownsberger said he heard clearly during the hearings that folks wanted to reunite the city of Fall River. But then he said we weren't sure where they wanted to put it after we united it. And so looking at the seacoast, looking at coastal communities and the cultural communities of the Azorian and Portuguese American heritage in southeastern Massachusetts, clearly there's a lot more in common with the 9th District than there is with Wellesley, Newton, and Brookline.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad you added that, because that's really important. And that is a question that's still on the table, so it needs to be discussed. We're now going to move on to the last part of our program, and I'm going to turn my virtual podium over to Mary Tamucci, who is a member of the Legislative Committee, so she can ask our legislators questions that have been posed by members of the public. So Mary?
Good evening. We have several questions, and I just want to let everyone know, if we don't get to all of them during this session, that Judy or I or one of the members of the committee will be diligent in getting them to the legislators so that we can get answers for our audience. And having said that, we'll turn to our first question. Trained machine gunners will not be able to protect us from the 21st century dangers of natural disasters and other civil emergencies. Is the state legislature able to update the mission of the Massachusetts National Guard to meet the new challenges of the century? Senator Moran, would you like to start with that one?
Sure. My view is really that the National Guard, in my understanding, it is really focused on a domestic mission. As you know, most recently, Governor Baker assigned the Guard to help out with school busing in some communities where we have a workforce shortage. Certainly, the Guard is well known in its expert disaster relief services domestically. And that core mission, I think, is integral to public safety, and it's the crux of Massachusetts service. I don't so much see the connection with machine gun range. That being said, I want to appreciate the fact that Fort Devens has gotten the go-ahead and is, I believe, more than halfway committed to constructing a machine gun range with respect to, as compared to the original plan for Joint Base Cape Cod, which had a lot of opposition, including from the governor, who spoke when I was with him in Sandwich about needing more updated data and really looking at the plan in more detail. So, Mary, thank you so much for that question.
You're welcome. Representative Vieira, would you like to
So we
chime
actually did a comprehensive update in the last session of the existing National Guard statutes to sort of bring them up to date. And as Senator Moran mentioned, that example of the governor activating the Guard for the school bus mission, activating the Guard to go in and deal with medical staff shortages in nursing homes, vaccinations, going into the VA center out in Western Massachusetts, the soldiers' home when the catastrophe happened there. So I think that our National Guard is nimble enough She is the nation's first. We just had the nation's first gala. I was with the Adjutant General and the Governor a few days ago at Gillette Stadium, celebrating the 385-year history of the Massachusetts National Guard. We need to be ready to protect our shores and to be able to activate our National Guard for federal service and have them trained for that. But I think that the statutes allow that nimbleness, and the governor has the ability to direct for the civil mission, to support civil authorities, and to deal with the new challenges that come forward. I will mention that we are the only state in the United States where the Adjutant General of the National Guard does not report directly to the governor, but reports through the Executive Office of Public Safety. And that is something that I've been having ongoing conversations with the administration and the Public Safety Homeland Security Committee, because I think that the Adjutant General should serve on the cabinet and report directly to the governor, so that that individual, he now, and it could be she in the future, we've got a couple of women in line as one stars that could potentially become the future Adjutant General, that they should be at the table, so that when we find opportunities to tap the Guard for missions that are what we might consider non-traditional, they're part of that conversation in real time with the policymakers.
Thank you. Representative Fernandez?
Sure. Well, agree with my wonderful colleagues. There's actually very little the state can do around the kind of national mission of an international mission of the military and the Guard's role in that. That is generally just controlled federally. As Sue and David mentioned, the governor can activate the Guard for domestic purposes. And I actually didn't know much about this, and a constituent reached out to me about trying to say that the Massachusetts, who served in the military, former Marine, who wanted to restrict the National Guard in Massachusetts from being able to serve in wars that did not have an AUMF, an authorization for the use of military force from Congress. And so one thing I love about this job, you never know what's going to cross your desk. This is something I did not have the answer to, but did a lot of digging, found out a lot about the National Guard in our state, what we can and cannot do. And the truth of the matter is the National Guard in Massachusetts almost entirely controlled by the federal government, actually, except for some domestic issues that can be done here in Massachusetts or to help out in other states.
Thank you very much. I'm going to throw this question out and see which one of you would like to take it first. There are no abortion services on Cape Cod. Can each legislator comment on how this gap can be addressed? Senator?
I'll say that the Mass Senate made a move toward just solidifying the right to abortion and women's health, and I think that it's a right place for Massachusetts to continue to lead in that regard, and we've got to really continue that conversation. And folks who do have concerns, we've got to be able to kind of be open and hear their worries, and really support women in being in control of their own bodies, most particularly, and to really get past the paternalistic, historical vestiges of really what are the origination of parts of the anti-abortion movement. So I look at it as simply a women's health issue and women being in control of their own bodies.
Thank you.
Mary, actually, this is the first time I've actually heard this. I didn't realize there were no services in the entire county.
Apparently not, sir.
I've been in office for 10 years and no one's brought that to my attention. So that's very, I'm interested to learn more about this because I did not realize that.
This is from the Upper Cape Women's.
Oh,
Mary, are you on?
somebody's
Yes.
free it here.
Yeah, Mary and I are in the same place, and it seems as if she froze. Are you unfrozen now?
No, I don't think I was frozen. I think
We're all set, Judy. I think we're all
Okay, I
good
think
here.
We're back.
now we're okay.
we're back.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Vieira, you were speaking.
I was saying that in 10 years that I've been in office, no one has brought to my attention that there are no services in Barnstable County on Cape Cod. Senator Moran, were you aware of this?
I was just online looking to do the research. I was not, although on the other hand, I also don't know of abortion services on Cape Cod. So while you were talking, I was trying to just do some research and clarify for myself.
Not to be the know-it-all here, but I was aware. And so this is actually a look, this is a huge issue for Cape Cod women. As someone who represents people that have to travel an hour and pay over $100 if they want to get their car just to get to Cape Cod, which doesn't have abortion access to get to another place off of it. This is certainly something that I've been very aware of. There's protests all over Massachusetts, including the Cape and Islands, about how Texas abortion laws are so restrictive and how women have to travel out of state to get an abortion in Texas and other deep South states. The closest place for women on the Cape and Islands and particularly Martha's Vineyard to get an abortion is actually in Providence, Rhode Island. So think of how screwed up that is, that in a state that is very pro women's rights and has people all over the place protesting lack of access in the deep South and having people have to go out of state. The closest place for women on the Cape and on Martha's Vineyard is actually in Rhode Island. So that I view is incredibly problematic. And also, look, this is like such an easy thing to solve. Cape Cod healthcare could just offer abortion. Like that just solves the problem. And by the way, like 90% of abortion is just taking 2 pills. That's all it is. This isn't like the 90% of it is just taking 2 pills. That's it. And that's still, there's still a lack of access here. We've had a lot of conversations with different providers that are more nationally known, but ultimately there's no reason why this can't exist in the existing healthcare framework that we already have here. One hospital on the Cape and Islands in my district on Nantucket already does this. There's no reason why the Vineyard Hospital can't do this. There's no reason why Cape Cod Hospital can't do it.
Thank you. I'm going to move right along because we've got a couple of other important ones. This one is about medical aid in dying. The question is, do you support the bill allowing this, with many safeguards, of course, that is working its way through our state legislature? And what are the chances of passage? Mr. Vieira, do you want to start with that?
Sure. We've had this question every year that we've done the League Forum. I haven't been and still am not supportive, and I don't see it happening in this session.
Thank you. Senator?
I am very much in favor. I've worked with Roger Kligler and others for years trying to move the bill. I've had conversations with leadership, and I'm optimistic that we'll see some movement.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fernandez.
I'm also very supportive of the bill, have testified at the hearings in support of it, along with co-sponsoring it. I don't think anyone should have to needlessly suffer at the end of their life if they're terminally ill.
Great, thank you very much, all three of you. Next question, what do you intend to do to address the extreme lack of medical health beds for young people in Massachusetts? I guess there should be a shortage of mental health beds for young people in Massachusetts. And are there any bills in the pipeline that you know of?
Can I start, Mary?
Certainly.
Senator Sear, just I mentioned quickly, filed a bill that does address that. The Senate will likely be taking up next week. I'll also say that months ago, I led a forum with Beth Israel Plymouth, as well as Cape Cod Healthcare, and on emergency room boarding, and a mother really opened her heart and life to tell the chronology of her grandson, who she is in charge of, who in care of, and spending essentially a month boarding in an ER, got ill, physically ill, had to be moved to a different hospital and start the count all over again. Emergency room personnel are not always trained to this level of mental health care. Mental health and folks who have addiction issues can be in a state of combativeness that takes up so many resources from the emergency room. It's been an absolute paralyzing problem for the community. And we have on top of that severe shortage of psychiatric staff, from psychiatrists all the way down to care workers and psychiatric nurses. It's an incredible problem that the Senate is taking up, and I'm happy to say that the Commissioner for Mental Health did attend the forum that I had and was starting to put together a better plan. I mean, we look at the veterans homes that we are rebuilding. We have not rebuilt or put funding into mental health facilities after they were closed. So it continues at a crisis level. We're starting to address it in the way that we should.
Thank you. Gentlemen, something briefly to add?
Yeah, I think the last piece that the senator mentioned about the facilities that we closed, we have these facilities across the Commonwealth that have been mothballed, in some cases not even mothballed, they're actually deteriorating. So as we get to the second ARPA round, as the infrastructure money comes, I think we need to have a serious discussion about where these state facilities are located and which would be most appropriate to stand up, not only for juveniles, which could be a portion, but for adults as well. And when we're talking about building back from the pandemic, my wife is an educator in the Falmouth schools, and we're seeing the depth of the mental health issues that young people are bringing back after this year and a half, almost 2 years of separation, in some cases isolation, like we've never seen before. And so I think we can be justified to take some of this infrastructure money to come out of COVID and address the burgeoning and growing mental health issues, not only with our young people, but with our population in general.
Thank you.
Here,
Mr. Fernandez.
yeah, very briefly, I'd say that the House and our ARPA legislation that just passed, we did allocate $250 million to mental health. The Senate just came out with a really good bill today that even increases that further and really hikes up rates for people who work in the field so that they're paid at better rates, along with many other things that I haven't been able to digest yet because We haven't seen the full bill. They just announced it today, but really good steps there. I think when you just take one quick step back and look at how we've handled people who are going through mental health issues or co-occurring issues with substance misuse and the like, we too often have incarcerated these people and have sent them to our prison to get help, which only exacerbates a mental health issue. It's been a completely backward system that we are now unwinding after years and years of it being a disaster.
Thank you. I have two really quick yes or no questions at the end, and one more lengthy question about the Shining Sea bike path that I don't think we'll have time to get to. So we'll send that one on to you. But the first yes or no, or close to, is, does your office send a newsletter to constituents? And if not, do you plan to start one?
I guess I'll jump in first. We do Facebook posts as well as the Senate website, but we don't do a per se newsletter. We'll be starting one up.
Okay.
Same with us.
Dylan?
We do
Okay.
Facebook, but I don't have an actual newsletter. If anyone watching tonight would like to become an editor to put together a newsletter for me, david.vieira@mahouse.gov, and would love to work with you. That might have some time to help us out with that.
Great.
We, hey, one of my newsletters came out today, so great question, very timely. And go sign up on dylanfernandez.com, put in your email, and about once a month, we break down what's going on at the State House, what we've been up to, things around the district, and we get a lot of good responses from it. So dylanfernandez.com, go sign up today.
Thank you. Thank you. In the half minute that I have for questions, one of our audience would like to know if each of you is vaccinated.
Yes, and boosted.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and
Dylan?
looking forward to that booster when I'm eligible.
Thank you. Thank you. Judy, I think that's our question time allotted. So I'll turn it
Yes, I
back to you.
think so. Okay, well, thank you very much. To our viewers, we thank you for tuning in. We hope you found the program interesting and that it provided some food for thought as we approach the end of 2021. And to the extent that I was interrupting people because I thought we had timing problems, I apologize, because I know all the information was interesting, and I'm sure that our audience probably would have preferred to hear the whole answer. Again, thank you to FCTV, to our panelists, to Mary Tamucci, and to 3 other league members who have been helping behind the scenes, Margaret Cooper and Kerry Walton and Mary Fran Buckley. Check the FCTV website for rebroadcast times. I think it's going to be rebroadcast 4 times, and for streaming to computers and to other devices. Now, my understanding was that this program was going to be followed immediately by a different program, and I've been getting some messages indicating that timing may have changed, but the information I had was stay tuned after this program for the Jewish Book Council's Crystal Knock interview with Faris Castle, author of The Unanswered Letter, and that's sponsored by the Jewish congregation. And I was told that the program would be shown in its entirety following our discussion. I've then been getting some other indications that that might not be happening right now, but let's assume it will. I'm going to say it will. And again, thank you for joining us, and good night.
Thank you, Judy. Thanks to the League and FCTV.
Have a good night, Judy. Team.
Good night, all. Thank you.